Nigeria and the United Nations launched COVID-19 fund for Nigeria. Federal government reels out fiscal stimulus on response to COVID-19 as OPEC Plus meeting earlier scheduled for today gets postponed to 9th April amid disturbing oil prices. COVID Relief Fund as at April 3rd stand at 19.488 billion naira. NNPC announced another 10 billion naira petroleum industry donation to fight COVID-19. This is Business Express reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital, and I am Benny Adams, your guide. Nigeria and the United Nations has jointly launched a basket fund to provide financial, logistics and technical support to Nigeria in the fight against COVID-19 pandemic. Chairman of the Presidential Task Force and Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, who launched the fund in Abuja, said it will complement efforts already initiated by the federal government to contain and manage the pandemic. The Nigerian UN COVID-19 Basket Fund will comprise donations in cash and kind expected from bilateral and multilateral partners and will be channeled to strengthening national response to the pandemic as well as mitigating the socio-economic effects on the poor and vulnerable in the country.
And COVID-19 Basket Fund is robust and is capable of rapid procurement of equipment and consumables, as well as supporting socio-economic interventions of the vulnerable groups, as well as efforts aimed at scaling up surveillance. The Basket Fund will also fund socio-economic measures, such as cash transfers or food distribution to vulnerable groups.
Secretary to the government also added that the COVID-19 Basket Fund is robust and is capable of rapid procurement of equipment and consumables as well as supporting socio-economic interventions of vulnerable groups. The Basket Fund will also fund socio-economic measures such as cash transfers or food distribution to vulnerable groups, among others. UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator Edward Kalon says the recovery from the COVID-19 crisis must lead to a different economy. He said the fund is part of efforts focused on building resilience, ensuring equal access to social services.
And declaring that indeed we have entered a recession as bad as or worse than 2009.
Already we have paid 1.2 million euro to UNICEF, and I expect to be able to announce significant additional support for the fund very soon. So tomorrow the senior leadership of the European Union is getting together to discuss what can be done to support Africa in this situation, where hopefully there's still a chance to learn from the experiences elsewhere and stopping the virus before consequences become too dire.
Last week, the federal government sought parliamentary approval for a 500 billion naira stimulus package to keep the economy going after the crude prices fell more than half the budgeted benchmark. Liakatun Babatunde was at the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, where the Minister Zainab Ahmed has been speaking on the planned spending.
The year 2020 was one so many people envisaged to be significant, and there were high hopes, but no one expected that a virus called Corona was going to come in and dampen global economies, bringing major markets to their knees all around the world, and Nigeria is one of those economies that were badly hit, especially with the falling oil prices.
The decline in international crude oil prices and domestic production may be magnified if a severe outbreak of COVID-19 occurs. Despite ongoing efforts to curtail the spread of the pandemic through compulsory lockdown of Lagos, Ogun, and the FCT, we still have to be very mindful that this can be aggravated.
Now, the president just last week approved a 500 billion naira stimulus package to put the economy back in shape. And given the breakdown, Minister of Finance Zainab Ahmed say the package is essentially to get Nigerians back into their jobs and profit making, and also to assure that there is liquidity in the hands of Nigerians.
Mr. President has also approved that the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning should engage with the Central Bank of Nigeria to agree on a debt and interest moratorium for states and for the federal government on CBN-funded loans in order to create fiscal space for the states and the federation. Accordingly, once average monthly receipts fall below a specific threshold that we and the states will determine, the interest and capital repayments will be suspended till a healthy path is attained.
The Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Richard Adeni Adebayo, has been speaking on market intelligence, response on essential commodities in combating COVID-19. Chimobi Walter Naji was there. What do you have for us, Chimobi?
Many countries in the world are still making efforts to meet its local demand for equipment and resources needed in the fight against coronavirus pandemic. Now for Nigeria, though some initiative has been taken by governments at all levels to address the situation, the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment has concluded consultations with its stakeholders in the manufacturing sector to engage companies, indigenous companies for that matter, in the production of personal protective equipment, drugs and pharmaceutical needs, as well as engaging some indigenous car manufacturers for the production of ventilators locally to address the needs as they arise.
We are also engaging our indigenous car manufacturers at this time to prepare themselves to tweak their operations to begin the manufacture of made in Nigeria ventilators, a critical medical equipment in the fight against the virus. Other noteworthy internal actions that we have taken as the ministry since the onset of the crisis include a staff sensitization exercise for up to 400 of our officials to ensure that they adopt global best practices while dealing with this pandemic.
The President, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, Engineer Mansur Ahmed, noted that the manufacturers already have put modalities in place to ensure Nigeria does not lag behind in the production of essential products needed to fight the coronavirus and further sustain the country's economy through sustaining the sector for proactive responses.
In the last 48 hours, or even the last 3-4 days since this effort started, we have resolved directly dozens of problems faced by our manufacturers trying to deliver either their products to their markets or indeed their raw materials to their warehouses. And it's continuing. This is a 24-hour effort.
And the ministry also constituted a committee to liaise with the manufacturers and other relevant organizations to ensure Nigeria comes out victorious out of this pandemic. In Abuja, I'm Chimobi Walter Naji, ET News.
Global trade activities slow down as oil prices gain steam since the indication by OPEC Plus to converge after a failed deal crashed oil prices to record low levels last month. Let's see how commodities are faring in this Monday. Well, the skies have gone quiet as countries around the world close borders in a bid to curb the spread of the coronavirus. There has been enforcement of travel restrictions with airlines around the world grounding most of their fleet, with many major carriers already announcing job cuts. The International Air Travel Association, IATA, has been calling on governments to speed up bailouts for airlines as it projects a 32% revenue decline for African airlines. I have with me Captain Roland Iyayi. He is the former MD NAMA and Chief Executive Officer Tabras Aviation, and joins us via Skype from Lagos to look at the implications of empty skies in Nigeria. You're welcome to Business Express, Captain.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. How are the skies affecting the aviation industry in Nigeria at present?
Well, as you're very much aware, the entire airspace has been completely shut down, except for emergency flights, relief flights, and all the rest of it. Special embassy flights have been put in place for the evacuation of their citizens from Nigeria. Apart from those flights, scheduled commercial operations have been shut down completely at all the airports in the country. Essentially, what this means for the entire industry is that we're going to have a situation where the economy, as it were, because if you look at aviation is inextricably linked to the national economy. So we're going to see a situation where the economy is going to come into a full recession if this particular pandemic continues for an extended period of time. Typically, airlines have approximately 30 to 60 days of liquidity to sustain operations in the absence of or in the event of any major occurrence like this pandemic. Given what we're hearing, there is a possibility of a shutdown of 30 to 60 days. What that would mean is that we would have a lot of airlines showing major crisis situation after this pandemic. There's a possibility that some airlines may actually go under in the aftermath of this pandemic.
Okay, with that in view now, do you see the industry making a rebound before the end of the year with this challenge on ground?
If anything, if we need to go by the historical precedent, in 2003, the entire world experienced SARS. That's the respiratory syndrome that we had in North America, in Asia Pacific region, and all the rest of it. You know, we had a situation where this particular SARS took 3 months to peak, and the airlines, it took the airlines maybe 6 to 7 months thereafter to recover. We had a similar thing in 2013 with the avian flu, and then of course we also had the MERS in 2015. Typically, we had the outbreaks peaked after about 3 months, and then it took about another 6 to 7 months for the airlines to recover. So what we're looking at, given that as a precedent, is that we might expect airline recoveries to probably take effect sometime early 2021.
Okay, then, how else can industry players remain in business, or at least make some income out of the situation?
Well, I'm not too sure there's any way airlines can make any income, because to start with this situation, the confidence of a traveling public is already eroded. When the pandemic is, after it's been dealt with, it will take some time for the confidence of a traveling public to be built up again. So that's essentially why you would have that lull for a period of between 6 and 9 months before we start talking about a rebound. In that period, it would take airlines a major capital outlay to recover their fleets, particularly for airlines that are very large. Given the fact that it will require them to send the airplanes back into for recovery, you need to have slots available if you can do that. So a lot of major planning work would need to be put in place by the airlines. So I see a situation where this will lead to a chaotic situation over the next 6 to 9 months. In the meantime, it's very difficult for any airline to be able to make any, which is why most airlines in the world have pretty much declared a force majeure and put all their, most of their staff on furlough. That's a leave without pay, at least in the first instance, 3 months. Most major airlines have done that now.
Okay, then, with that projection in mind, with no rebound anytime soon, do you agree that the industry actually needs a bailout? And where bailout fails, what else?
Indeed, there's a need for bailout, but the structure of a bailout, I think, is the most important thing that we need to address. When we talk about bailouts, readily people start talking about cash doleouts to airlines and all the rest of it. I do not think that would be the best way to go about it, because besides everything else, that can be subject to all manner of abuses. I think the government needs to look at, particularly for the domestic carriers, the multiplicity of taxes that has been imposed on Nigerian airlines as a way of relief. The government has removed the VAT on airline ticket sale. That's a good welcome. There's a 5% ticket sales charge accruable to the Civil Aviation Authority. There's a need to look at all these implied taxes, charges, as a way of giving succor for the airlines to be able to make a rebound. Also, maybe the government can consider tax holidays for the major airlines operating, so that
Okay, it seems we've lost Yai there. That was Roland Yai, former MD NAMA. Moving on, 3.5% is what the all share lost in the week ended April the 3rd as COVID-19 concerns continue to affect economies globally. Amina Nujaim brings us the outlook.
A total turnover of 1.534 billion shares worth 11.267 billion were traded in 18,928 deals. The NSE All-Share Index appreciated by 3.51% to close the week at 21,094.62 basis points, while market capitalization stood at 10.994 trillion naira. Performances across most sectors were bearish, with the exception of the NSE Oil and Gas, which appreciated by 2.33%, while NSE ASM Index closed flat. The financial services industry led the activity chart with 1.105 billion shares, valued at 7.100 billion naira, traded in 12,225 deals, contributing 71.99% and 63.02% to the total equity turnover volume and value. The industrial goods followed with 218.471 million shares, worth 1.236 billion naira in 1,610 deals. The third place was the consumer goods industry with a turnover of 134.599 million shares, worth 1.855 billion naira in 2,332 deals. Trading in the top three equities, namely Sterling Bank PLC, Zenith Bank PLC and Maya PLC, accounted for 752.359 million shares, worth 3.247 billion naira in 4,039 deals, contributing 49.03% and 28.82% to the total equity turnover volume and value. Federal government bonds were traded, valued at 11.145 million naira in 2 deals. 15 equities appreciated in price last week, 36 equities depreciated in price, while 112 equities remained unchanged.
The Nigerian stock market continues to receive a blast as COVID-19 still ravages the world. Transactions on the floor of the exchange depreciated by 2.02% to begin this week, closing at 20,669.38 basis points, with market capitalization closing at a low 10.771 trillion naira. FBNH, Guarantee and Zenith Bank were the most active to boost market turnover. Flour Mill, WAPCO and Access Bank topped the list of gainers for the day, with Flour Mill trading at 21 naira 5 kobo. Mutual sentiments are visible in the global market as investors lost appetite for stocks. Here are highlights of markets across the globe.
European markets bounced, cheered on by the gradual slowdown in the new coronavirus cases. In early trading, the German DAX inched up 4.10%, followed closely behind by the CAC 40 that advanced 3.59%, as well as the FTSE 100 that was up 2.52%. Now, stocks in the U.S. were all bearish, with speculations that the S&P 500 could plunge to 1,500 in worst case, with the coronavirus fallout lingering for years. The S&P 500 posted 1.51, while the Dow Jones declined 1.69%, followed by the Nasdaq that dropped 1.53%. Meanwhile, Asian shares rebounded on Monday as investors clutched on the threads of hope that the battle against the coronavirus pandemic may be making some progress in some hard-hit areas. The Nikkei 225 posted 4.24%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index 2.13%. Shanghai's market was closed for a public holiday. Now back home in Africa, the equities market was mostly positive. The South Africa Top 40 advanced 4.41%. Nairobi Osha Index was up 1.46%, while Namibia Overall Index advanced 1.13%, as well as Ghana's JSE Composite up 0.49%. Tunisia's Tunidex declined.
Let's see how the Naira is faring alongside other major currencies. This is the point where we end this edition of Business Express. We value your feedback, so keep the comments, observations, and suggestions coming. Be informed that all previous episodes are available on YouTube on the NTA's channel. You can also communicate with us on Twitter, and the handle is @NTA News Now. Don't forget to use #It'sBizX. Remember to intermittently wash your hands with soap under running water as the world battles COVID-19. Be safe out there. Business Express returns Wednesday. I am Benny Adams.